In December of 2013, a game was revealed at the VGX Awards. A small and unknown studio known as Hello Games was announcing something spectacular, and the project seemed to have a slew of innovations that had every gamer foaming at the mouth with anticipation. A massively ambitious game titled No Man's Sky. So, to display the amount of anticipation that was shared all across the gaming world, I've combed through the archives of the internet and have found various articles discussing the launch of the game, such as... oh dear. Oh, what about CD Projekt Red? They made The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, one of the best games ever made. They made that Cyperpunk game, right? That super cool, flashy looking game that looked absolutely incredible, and I bet that game was oh my. This calls for an analysis from my archives. In recent history, we have seen some absolutely astounding comebacks in the world of gaming. Games that began as critical failures to grow into beloved titles. But what has been the secret formula for a successful comeback? What did the studios of Hello Games and CD Projekt Red do in order to turn around a tumultuous and disastrous launch into creating a truly beloved experience in Cyberpunk 2077 and No Man's Sky? I've been researching the archives, and today we're going to be diving into what it takes for a game to bounce back from disaster and redefine its legacy. This is the art of the comeback. What happens when a small studio promises the universe? When promises are handed out like indulgences centuries ago? What happens when the time for talk is over and the time for action is upon you? No Man's Sky was seen as a fresh idea in the world of gaming. It was revered as being the beginning of a new trend wherein the indie market would overtake the AAA dominion over the industry. This game was even thought to become the next Minecraft. I know, stay with me. It was touted to be a mainstream flight simulation game, giving mechanics that weren't as complex as something like Elite Dangerous. But by far, the words we heard most were procedurally generated universe, 4.3 billion planets, hundreds of millions of stars, etc., etc. But, as with most games these days, it was delayed. A taste of the mettle of Sean Murray and Hello Games was put on display as laid out in the response to various death threats sent to him following the delay. In an interview with Jason Schreier, Sean Murray shared the following tweet. "I have received loads of death threats this week, but don't worry. Hello Games now looks like the house from Home Alone. You absolute Chad." This brings up the obvious point. Don't make death threats. I mean, I'm just a lowly scribe on the internet, but even I know death threats aren't cool. Ever. On the day before the release, Sean issued out a warning, stating that No Man's Sky may not be, quote, the game you imagined from those trailers, and instead claimed it to be a, quote, very, very chill game. When No Man's Sky was released to the public on August 9th, 2016, the developers at Hello Games undoubtedly held their breath, bracing for the storm they had ill prepared for. This hype kept growing until it became too big to control. Sean Murray himself did not halt any of the blatantly incorrect information that was being said about his project. He didn't pull the brakes when this train was undoubtedly heading towards a brick wall. Just before release, Hello Games stated they tried to be reasonably open and honest about what the game will be. But this train was rolling, and it wasn't stopping. If you've been in the gaming world as long as I have, or hell, even just since 2015, you know the scale of backlash that erupted from the release of No Man's Sky. The lack of features in the finished game was actually impressive. It seemed as though the entirety of what was promised was completely and utterly a lie. Entire features, functions, and mechanics seemed to be completely missing from the finished game. Most notably was a multiplayer system. Sean and Hello Games seemed to suggest in multiple interviews and statements that No Man's Sky would be a game where you would be able to run around a universe and muck around with your friends.
Can you run into other people, other players on the game?
Yes, but the chances of that are incredibly rare, just because of the size of what we're building.
Will you be able to play with your friends?
Yeah.
At release, this was shown to not be the case, and Murray himself stated that there was a function in the game where you could enter into someone else's game if you were in their proximity, but it was removed. At release, the studio claims to have expected about 10,000 players or so at launch. Instead, the amount was over 500,000 across both PlayStation and Windows. Hello Games affirmed this notion after release, saying they had, quote, far more players than expected, and were working on hiring more help to support the game and fix critical issues that were present at launch. In 2 short months, No Man's Sky was given a mostly negative average on Steam, and players were furious. A majority of the features promised both in advertisements and in publicity for the game were absent, and aside from some patch notes, Hello Games went radio silent. Until November of 2016, with the announcement of the Foundation update. Proper name for that, I would suppose. With both Sony and Hello Games going silent for months after launch, the ones who were loudest and irate, the betrayed public, were yelling unopposed. They were screaming into the ether, where they were effectively speaking through megaphones with no resistance. Refunds were issued, Hello Games was in constant communication with Scotland Yard, and their own Twitter account was hacked, and the notorious tweet was posted. No Man's Sky was a mistake. With the announcement of the fittingly titled Foundation update, Hello Games broke their silence with a simple message. We have been quiet, but we are listening and focusing on improving the game that our team loves and feels so passionately about. This update was to introduce a base building feature for the game, as well as setting the stage for other updates to be added later. There was something suspiciously missing from this announcement though. A release date. But before any speculation or guessing could be made, Hello Games released the update 2 days after the announcement. This was the start of No Man's Sky's redemption. The next major update, Pathfinder, was released in March of 2017, and the third major update, Atlas Rises, was released a year after the initial launch of the game. No Man's Sky had become, and is now, a completely different game. Hello Games had done it. They had redeemed themselves in the eyes of the public and in the media. Many now felt the game was much better from the initial launch and swiftly approaching what they expected. Instead of nationwide press tours to discuss the game and show it off, Murray now tweets an emoji, hinting at what update could be coming next, with likely only days to wait for its implementation. Keeping their heads down and continuing to push forward is what plunged Hello Games from a hole in the ground up into their place in the stars. CD Projekt Red released The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt on May 18th, 2015. Widely hailed as one of the best games of the decade and of all time, The Witcher 3 stands as a shining example of amazing storytelling, character writing, visual design, and overall game design. I replayed it this year myself and can say that without a doubt, it still holds up to this day. In 2018, CD Projekt Red released what is still, in my opinion, the best cinematic trailer of any game in history. Thus, Cyberpunk 2077 was on everybody's radar. The marketing team went absolutely haywire. They were designing gaming chairs, energy drinks, sneakers, video cards, and, of course, it goes without mentioning, the main source of advertisement, Keanu Reeves.
Cyberpunk!
But who could forget the amount of delays that were given to us? Those oh-so memorable yellow screens we saw on Twitter, saying that the game had to be pushed back. For the record, it is perfectly reasonable and okay for a studio to delay a game. But soon, a day was set in stone, a day that would be remembered by all who saw that trailer back in 2018. Oh, Cyberpunk 2077, the disastrous deluge of delays, disarray, and disappointment. What in the hell happened? On December 10th, 2020, a day I actually set a countdown on my phone for, I was slapped in the face with reality so hard I couldn't believe it. The absolute catastrophe catastrophe that was the launch of Cyberpunk 2077 was one of the most memorable experiences I've had in gaming. Let's set the obvious aside, like, Liana Rupert experiencing a grand mal seizure while playing the game, or the strict review embargo that required NDAs by the recipients. Not to mention these copies were exclusively for PC. No, we need to talk about the meat of the game. The logs I have in my archive are not pleasant, but they are plentiful. The console release, it didn't work. Just did not work on Xbox and PlayStation. This was an absolute high-profile disaster with such a beloved studio seeming to be falling from grace right in front of our eyes. So much so that on December 17th, only a week after release, Sony announced that they would offer refunds to those who purchased the game on the PlayStation Store, and removed it from sale until further notice. This had not happened before and has not happened since, at least to the best extent of my knowledge. But it didn't stop there. Microsoft offered players refunds, and GameStop accepted returns of the games, even if they had been opened, which is against their own store policy. A class action suit was filed against CD Projekt Red and was their Christmas present when it was filed officially on December 24th, 2020, less than 4 weeks after the game's release. A second class action suit followed in January of 2021, and by May of 2021, 4 separate lawsuits were filed against the company, and CD Projekt Red had paid out a total of $1.85 million.
Fuck.
The fierce and loyal pro-customer reputation bestowed upon the Polish titan of a company completely evaporated in a matter of weeks. So, what happened next? Well, the company seemed to have taken a page out of Hello Games' book, because after issuing out an apology and taking full responsibility, CD Projekt Red outlined a year-long path that involved patches to bring the game to perform better on console and to improve issues with the game overall. The first major update coming in early 2021, which addressed game-breaking issues and made the game much more playable, especially on the previous generation of consoles. Soon after, a patch in August of the same year was released, giving quality of life improvements and new free content. CD Projekt Red was showing that there was still a commitment to addressing players' requests and feedback. The largest update yet, Patch 1.5, came in February of 2022, a major overhaul to the game and the true next-gen update. Soon, Cyberpunk would be ready for its next major update, the update that would solidify CD Projekt Red's comeback, the release of the major expansion for the game, Phantom Liberty. With a new skill tree, redesigned police system, revamped AI for enemy encounters, vehicle combat, and a fresh UI, this marked a turning point in Cyberpunk. In addition to these updates, there is an entire story to play through. A wave of positive reception washed over the game, and it was here in the release of Phantom Liberty that CD Projekt Red had developed on Cyberpunk's original promise. With an openness to feedback, dedication to fix what was broken, and finally delivering on the immersive world promised, CD Projekt Red initiated a monumental comeback after such a ruinous release. A combination of its gradual transformation and its expansion transformed the game that was deemed the most disappointing game of all time into a memorable and immersive open-world RPG. In the two cases we've just gone over, what are some commonalities between the two titles? What turned these two titles around from disappointing and apathetic into memorable stories of redemption and overall great games? I believe the answer lies in community engagement, transparency, and relentless improvements to a project that you are truly passionate about. With Hello Games, it was their major first iteration onto the major gaming stage. And based on interviews with Sean, you can tell he is passionate about what he does. There's a twinkle in his eye when talking about his game, and he seems genuinely happy when going over what they're working on with No Man's Sky. You have to want to make things right, and without a doubt, Hello Games wanted to. In keeping silent and their ears to the ground, Sean and Hello Games displayed a gumption that is needed in order to face down the storm of negativity and wade through the waters of backlash in order to arrive at the paradise of redemption. In CD Projekt Red's case, their resolve came from a place of restoration. They came off of one of the most successful and beloved titles in the history of gaming, and had virtually everything to lose with such a botched title in Cyberpunk. Trust can be an incredibly difficult thing to recover once lost, and without a doubt, CD Projekt Red lost trust with the release of Cyberpunk. From a game with some minor technical issues that weren't game-breaking, CD Projekt Red had a vast story, characters, and amazing gameplay that held The Witcher 3 up as a pinnacle of art. Confidence in the company was eroded, and CD Projekt Red knew this. But practicing a similar strategy that Hello Games implemented just a few years ago, CD Projekt Red kept their ears to the ground and involved themselves heavily in their community, taking in feedback, listening to issues, and reading bug reports to deliver on what they promised all those years ago. Trust has not completely rebuilt, but I can only speak for myself. CD Projekt Red's train flew off the rails, but it has since been realigned and has chugged along since the release of Phantom Liberty. Is there a limit to what developers can fix after such botched releases? Well, literally speaking, yes. Nowadays, developers can fix a considerable amount for their titles, especially in the examples that we've gone over. But it's a question of whether or not those fixes will be in vain or well received. Fixes are just that, fixes. They don't take back the initial embarrassment that occurs with such a bad release. After all, you only have one chance to make a first impression. Some of your audience will be turned off for a very long time, if not indefinitely, if your first impression is as calamitous as something like Cyberpunk or No Man's Sky. There are, after all, two halves to a comeback, the defeated and the doubter, which goes into a question that needs to be asked. Can a game truly redeem itself without the support and patience of its community? I would wager no. Without buy-in of some kind from your community, your updates and fixes risk falling on deaf ears and uninterested minds. I can point to no better example of this than BioWare's Anthem. Marketed as a looter shooter, Anthem was criticized for having shallow endgame content, repetitive missions, and a very poor loot system. In a looter shooter game. BioWare announced Anthem Next with very minimal excitement, and after several years of minimal updates, BioWare canceled the revamp. Players had already moved on from that point, and the trust in BioWare's ability to redeem the game was low. The cancellation of Anthem Next marked the end, and the game remains abandoned by both the developers and their community. In this case, the defeated remained so, and the doubter was proven right. Is it because there is a major saturation in the market for games like Anthem? Or is it a growing distrust in BioWare finally boiling over? Who's to say? What is undoubtedly true is that CD Projekt Red and Hello Games succeeded in the face of what should have been studio-ending titles. Releases that have shut their doors for good, but instead have given them the reputations as comeback kids. Redemptive studios who, against all odds, kept their passion at the forefront of their projects and catapulted themselves back into the spotlight despite being pelted with tomatoes by the masses. Like Rocky standing up after being knocked down, they fought through and came back as developers to be admired. From disaster to triumph, these comeback stories aren't just about technical improvements. They're about trust, dedication, and a vision that evolves with feedback and community engagement. These studios did not waste time shifting blame and did not dwell on their mistakes. They acknowledged what was wrong, took accountability, and began working on improvements. Hello Games kept their heads down. With a solid understanding of what they wanted and what the community wanted, they quietly amended the game they released, and as a result, No Man's Sky is now a beloved title, still releasing expansions to this day. CD Projekt Red acknowledged they squandered the trust they gained after The Witcher 3. They took a massive hit in lawsuits, and with their game being pulled from online stores, they too took accountability for their blunder. They listened to community feedback and kept conversations productive. All this while issuing small updates regularly and major updates at least twice a year. Now Cyberpunk enjoys a high number of players. Just now, on a Wednesday evening, according to Steam, there are still 24,000 players still playing to this day. True redemption in gaming isn't just about fixing mistakes, it's about rekindling a sense of wonder and trust, proving that a game can rise from its own ashes to become what it was always meant to be. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end here. I really do appreciate it. On the left, you will see my other video essay where I dive into the horrors of Resident Evil Village, and on the right is a link to my channel. If you would like to go ahead and subscribe for more content like this, more will be on the way as the archives are plenty. Thank you so much, and have an amazing day.